All right, let's make this simple. Show me proof you're in this country legally. And what authority do you have to ask me that while I'm filling up my truck? If you don't prove you're a citizen right now, you're going in cuffs. I'm a citizen and a captain with 17 years of service. You want proof?
Let me see your papers. Malik Carter stopped mid-step in the grocery store parking lot, a small bag in his hand. He had been running simple errands, off-duty, dressed casually, thinking about getting home before traffic built up. The voice behind him was firm, direct, and carried authority without explanation. He turned and saw two federal agents approaching, a man and a woman wearing tactical vests clearly marked with federal enforcement lettering. The male agent stepped forward first. I said, "Let me see your papers." Malik kept his tone calm. "I'm sorry. Immigration documents. Identification." There was no greeting, no reason given, just a demand. Malik immediately felt the shift. The normal rhythm of the afternoon was gone. A few people nearby slowed down, sensing tension. "Is there a reason you're asking me for immigration documents?" he asked. The male agent, Colton Hayes, according to the name tag, replied, "We're conducting enforcement in this area." "That doesn't answer my question," Malik said evenly. The female agent, Brielle Kingston, stepped in. "Sir, if you have nothing to hide, just provide the documentation, and we'll be done." Malik had heard that line before in different forms throughout his career. If you have nothing to hide, just comply. He kept his breathing steady. He had built his reputation on professionalism and de-escalation. He believed calm solved most problems. "I'm a U.S. citizen," he said, "and I'm not required to carry immigration papers." Hayes moved a step closer, then show identification. Malik slowly handed over his driver's license. Hayes studied it longer than necessary. "You live nearby?" Hayes asked. "Yes." "You employed?" "Yes." "Where?" Malik felt the questioning drift beyond identification into something else. "I don't see how that's relevant. You're being uncooperative," Hayes replied. "No," Malik said calmly. "I'm asking what legal basis you have beyond identifying me." Kingston crossed her arms. "We're federal agents, sir." "I understand that," Malik responded, "but being a federal agent doesn't remove constitutional limits." Hayes's expression hardened slightly. "You're not in a position to lecture me." "I'm not lecturing you," Malik said. The exchange drew attention. A bystander near the entrance of the store paused, phone in hand. Hayes handed the license back, but didn't step away. "You don't seem concerned," Hayes said. "Concerned about what?" Malik asked, "Being stopped by federal agents." "Should I be?" Kingston observed him closely. "Most people don't respond the way you are." "And how am I responding?" "Calm," she said. "Too calm." Malik blinked. "Is calm suspicious now?" Neither agent answered directly. He understood what was happening, even if they wouldn't say it. He had walked out of a store with groceries. He hadn't matched a specific suspect description. He hadn't been reported for a crime. He was alone. He knew why they had approached him. "Sir," Hayes said again, "we're asking one more time. Provide documentation confirming your status." "I've told you I'm a citizen." "Then prove it." "Is my driver's license not proof of identity and status?" "It proves identity," Hayes said, "not immigration status." Malik glanced around. Other people exited the store without being stopped. "Are you asking everyone for immigration papers?" he asked. Hayes didn't respond. The man with the phone raised it fully now, clearly recording. "Put the phone down," Hayes called out. "I'm just standing here," the man replied. Malik understood how quickly situations could escalate once cameras were involved. He also understood that every movement would now be scrutinized. He made a decision. Slowly, he reached inside his jacket. Both agents immediately tensed, hands shifting closer to their belts. Malik kept his movements deliberate and controlled. He pulled out a leather case and opened it. Inside was his badge. "Police Captain." "I'm Captain Malik Carter," he said calmly. "City Police Department." The tension shifted. Hayes stared at the badge. Kingston leaned in to look more closely. "Your law enforcement?" Hayes asked. "Yes." "Why didn't you say that earlier?" "You didn't ask," Malik replied. Hayes seemed caught between frustration and uncertainty. Kingston removed her sunglasses. "Do you have department ID?" Malik handed over his credentials. Hayes examined them carefully. "You're off duty?" "Yes." "And you didn't think to identify yourself immediately?" Malik held his gaze. "From the start, I was a citizen being asked for immigration papers without cause." The bystander recording spoke up. "He's a cop?" Malik ignored the comment. Hayes handed the badge and ID back. "You understand how this looks." "I do," Malik said. Kingston added, "We're conducting enforcement based on information." "About me?" Malik asked. "No." "Then what was the basis for stopping me?" Hayes hesitated. "You matched a general description." "Of what?" Malik asked. "Height, clothing, build." Hayes didn't provide details. "We're done here," he said, finally. There was no apology, no acknowledgement, just an abrupt end. The agents turned toward their vehicle. Malik stood still, processing. He could walk away and let it go. That instinct had guided him for years. Stay professional, absorb the insult, avoid escalation. He had always believed calm compliance protected everyone involved. But the phrase general description stayed with him. He looked around the parking lot again. Other men walked freely to their cars. None had been questioned. "Agent Hayes," Malik called out. Hayes paused but didn't fully turn around. "Next time," Malik said evenly, "lead with the law, not suspicion." Hayes didn't respond. The agents entered their SUV and drove away. The man who had recorded approached cautiously. "You okay?" "I'm fine," Malik said. "You want the video?" Malik thought about it. "Yes," he replied. They exchanged contact information. As the parking lot settled back into its routine, Malik remained standing for a moment. He replayed every word in his mind, the demand, the tone, the lack of explanation. He knew constitutional standards. He knew what reasonable suspicion required. He also knew how often vague language covered weak justification. He got into his car and started the engine. His hands were steady. Years of training ensured that. But inside, something had shifted. Calm had carried him through the confrontation. It had kept the situation from escalating further. But calm hadn't erased what happened. He understood something clearly as he drove away. This wasn't just an awkward misunderstanding. It was a decision someone made the moment they saw him. He could ignore it, or he could document it. For the first time, the option of challenging it didn't feel like overreacting. It felt necessary. As he merged into traffic, Malik realized the afternoon had changed more than he expected. What began as a routine errand had exposed something deeper, something that wouldn't disappear simply because the agents drove away. This wasn't over. "Let me see your papers." Colton Hayes didn't slow down as he said it. He walked straight toward Malik with the kind of confidence that assumes compliance. His badge hung from his vest. His posture was rigid. He wasn't asking. He was directing. Malik had just stepped away from his car when he heard it. He turned, grocery bag still in his hand. "I'm sorry." Malik said, "Identification. Immigration documents." Hayes replied, already closing the distance between them. There was no introduction, no explanation of why he was being stopped, just suspicion wrapped in authority. Brielle Kingston moved in slightly behind Hayes, watching Malik closely. Her eyes didn't leave his hands. Malik kept his voice steady. "Is there a reason you're requesting that?" "We're conducting enforcement in this area," Hayes said. "That doesn't explain why you're stopping me," Malik replied. Hayes studied him in silence for a second. "You match a description." "Of what?" "Just provide your documents and we'll clear this up." Malik had been on the other side of interactions like this for over a decade. He knew how tone could escalate or calm a situation. He chose calm. "I'm a U.S. citizen," he said, "and I'm not required to carry immigration papers." Hayes' jaw tightened slightly. "Then show ID." Malik handed over his driver's license without argument. Hayes examined it carefully, longer than necessary. Kingston stepped closer, reading over his shoulder. "You live around here?" Hayes asked. "Yes." "You employed?" "Yes." "Where?" Malik paused. "Am I being detained?" Hayes didn't answer directly, just answer the question. With respect, Malik said, evenly, "What's the legal basis for the stop?" Kingston stepped forward now. "Sir, we're federal agents. We don't need to debate this in a parking lot." "I'm not debating," Malik said. "I'm asking." A few people nearby had slowed down. One man stood several feet away, phone halfway raised. Hayes handed the license back, but didn't step away. "You seem very confident." "I haven't done anything wrong," Malik replied. "That's not what I asked." Malik held his ground. "Then what are you asking?" There was a pause. The air felt heavier now. Authority was being challenged, not aggressively, but clearly. Hayes shifted his stance. "Provide documentation confirming your legal status." "My driver's license does that," Malik said. "It confirms identity. And citizenship." Hayes looked at Kingston, then back at Malik. "We can do this the easy way." Malik had heard that line before in different forms. It usually meant, "Comply quietly." "I am complying," Malik said. "I provided identification." Hayes took a small step closer. "Not threatening, but deliberate. You're being evasive." "No," Malik replied calmly. "I'm asserting my rights." Kingston's eyes narrowed slightly. Most people don't react like this. "How should I react?" Malik asked. Neither answered. The moment stretched. It wasn't loud. It wasn't chaotic. But it was tense. Two federal agents standing in front of him, expecting submission. Malik standing still, refusing to give them more than the law required. Hayes finally spoke again. "We're not done here." Malik met his gaze. "Then tell me why I'm being stopped." Hayes didn't. He just stared, as if waiting for Malik to break first. Malik didn't. The courtroom held its breath as the foreperson stood, paper in hand. "We, the jury, find in favor of the plaintiff, Malik, with damages awarded at $9,300,000. The words landed like a hammer. Malik's shoulders relaxed slightly, tension finally breaking after months of waiting. Around him, murmurs rippled. Some faces were shocked, others relieved, but all felt the weight of what had just happened. The agency's attorneys slumped. Their strategy, built on procedure and deniability, had collapsed under the evidence, the footage, and the witnesses. What had begun as routine bureaucratic defense had turned into public failure. Every misstep, every ignored complaint, every unjust pause in the lobby had now cost them financially and reputationally. Malik's victory was more than monetary. It was a statement that authority without fairness had consequences. Outside the courtroom, phones were raised again. Reporters crowded near the steps, microphones pointed toward Malik. He stepped forward, calm but deliberate. There was no anger in his voice, no grandstanding, only clarity. "This isn't about money," he said. "It's about accountability. It's about dignity. It's about ensuring that procedures meant to protect people don't become tools for unnecessary obstruction or humiliation." He paused, letting the words sink in. Cameras captured every moment. But Malik didn't feel the need to perform. He was speaking truth, and truth didn't require embellishment. "When systems fail us," he continued, "we have a responsibility to hold them accountable, not for revenge, but for reform, for clarity, for change." People outside the courthouse nodded, whispered, recorded. Social media lit up with clips from the trial, now showing not only the detention but the verdict, the public acknowledgement of wrongdoing. The narrative had shifted. What had started as a single moment of unnecessary scrutiny had become a lesson in transparency, evidence, and perseverance. Malik's attorney placed a hand on his shoulder, subtle but supportive. He nodded once, grateful for the guidance and careful preparation that had made this possible. The public, the cameras, the agency, they had all seen the truth laid bare. The cost of ignoring it had been steep. As Malik descended the courthouse steps, he looked at the crowd that had gathered. Some had been there from the beginning, some only drawn by curiosity or the virality of the clips. He addressed them directly, voice steady and calm. "Every one of us deserves respect and fairness, no matter our role, no matter our status. Accountability isn't optional. It's necessary. And reform isn't a choice, it's a responsibility." He stepped aside, letting the cameras capture him, letting reporters take notes. Justice had been served in a courtroom, but the real transformation was public communal. People had seen that standing for truth mattered, that persistence mattered, and that dignity could be defended without anger, without spectacle. Malik turned, walking away from the steps with the quiet confidence of someone who had not just won a verdict, but had sparked a lesson in fairness that would echo far beyond the walls of that courthouse. "We're done here," Hayes said, but he didn't move. Malik noticed that immediately. The words suggested closure. The stance didn't. Hayes stayed planted in front of him, feet squared, shoulders tight. Kingston shifted slightly to Malik's right, closing the space without making it obvious. "If we're done," Malik said calmly, "then I'll be on my way." He stepped to the left. Hayes stepped the same direction. It was subtle, but deliberate. "You're not free to leave yet," Hayes said. Malik stopped. "You just said we were done. We're clarifying a few things." "What things?" Hayes ignored the question. "Why were you in this area?" "I live 10 minutes from here." "That's not what I asked." Malik felt the tension rise, not because of volume, but because of control. Hayes didn't want answers. He wanted submission. "I was buying groceries," Malik said. "You saw me walk out of the store." Kingston spoke up. "Captain, no one's accusing you of anything." "Then why am I not free to go?" She didn't answer directly. "This is a federal operation." "And I respect that," Malik said, "but authority has limits." Hayes let out a short breath. "You keep saying that." "Because it's true." Hayes took a half step closer. "You're making this more difficult than it needs to be." "I provided ID. I identified myself as law enforcement. What else do you need?" Hayes looked at Kingston again. There was something about being challenged in public that clearly bothered him. The phone across the lot was still recording. "Turn the camera off," Hayes called out again. The man didn't respond. Kingston addressed Malik instead. "You could have handled this differently." Malik blinked. "Handled what differently?" "You escalated," she said. Malik stared at her. "By asking why I was being stopped? You questioned federal authority." "I asked for legal basis." Hayes's voice sharpened. "You don't get to interrogate us." "I'm not interrogating," Malik replied evenly. "I'm protecting my rights." There was a long pause. No shouting. No dramatic gestures. Just a standstill in the middle of a parking lot. Hayes changed tactics. "Step over to the vehicle," he said. "For what purpose?" Malik asked, "To continue this conversation." "I'm not stepping anywhere without reasonable suspicion," Malik said. "Am I being detained?" Hayes hesitated. "Just a second." But Malik caught it. "Answer the question," Malik said calmly. "Am I being detained?" Kingston crossed her arms. "You're being temporarily held." "For what crime?" "No one said you committed a crime." "Then on what grounds am I being held?" The silence that followed said more than either of them wanted it to. Hayes's jaw tightened again. "You're pushing this." "No," Malik said. "I'm documenting it." That changed the energy completely. Hayes understood what that meant. This wasn't just a tense encounter anymore. This was something that could be reviewed later. Kingston's tone cooled. "Captain, we're trying to resolve this." "Then resolve it," Malik replied, "because right now, you're refusing to de-escalate." Hayes looked at him for a long moment. Then finally, reluctantly, he stepped aside. But the damage had already been done. The moment he stepped toward the door, someone shouted, "Hey, wait!" Phones were raised instantly. Within seconds, a dozen strangers had their cameras out, recording every step. The air shifted. People weren't just watching anymore. They were documenting, judging, sharing. "Sir, can you stop for a second?" One voice called from across the sidewalk. The man froze, hands on the door handle, and turned slowly. He was calm, collected but alert. Around him, whispers spread like wildfire. A young woman in a hoodie edged closer, phone trembling in her hands. "Why is he being stopped?" she asked aloud, more to the crowd than to anyone in particular. The words bounced back, amplified by curiosity and concern. Other phones joined hers, creating a chorus of silent observers, all focused on him. The officer stepped forward, blocking the entrance, tone firm but not loud. "I need to check something." The man's expression didn't change, but his eyes flicked toward the cameras. He knew the world was watching now. Every movement mattered. Every pause felt heavier than it should. People leaned in. A passerby in a baseball cap muttered, "This doesn't feel right," and held up their phone higher. Another added, "Come on, man, he's just trying to get in." The tension between them was electric, the invisible barrier of social pressure pressing on both the officer and the man. A small group gathered at the edge of the street, whispering instructions to each other. "Keep recording," someone said. "Make sure this goes online." The sound of notifications pinging broke the quiet, a reminder that someone, somewhere, was already sharing it. The man raised his hand slowly, not in surrender, but in acknowledgement of the cameras. "I'm just here for my appointment," he said. The words were steady, almost measured, but the hum of voices around him made them feel like shouts. The officer hesitated, glancing at the growing crowd. Phones pointed in every direction, capturing angles he hadn't accounted for. The tension tightened. Every second stretched longer. No one could tell who would move first, the crowd, the officer, or the man himself. Then a voice rang out from the sidewalk, calm but commanding, "Just let him go. You're being watched?" It was enough to crack the moment. The officer stepped aside, still cautious, still professional, but aware that the public eye had already turned this into more than a private encounter. The man moved through the door, slow but steady. The cameras didn't stop. People whispered, shared updates on their phones, and replayed the short clip that had already started to circulate. What should have been a simple step inside became a moment frozen in the eyes of everyone who had recorded it, a public memory that none of them would forget. The air finally eased, but the energy lingered. Bystanders looked at each other, realizing they had all witnessed something unusual, something that felt bigger than a single interaction, and that maybe in their hands, it had become permanent. Malik held out his ID again, calm but firm. "I'm the federal magistrate assigned for this building," he said, his voice steady. The officer looked at it, then back at him, eyes narrowing slightly. "I need you to wait here," the officer replied, tone clipped. Malik stayed where he was, but every second stretched longer than it should. People had started to notice. A few whispered, some stared, some filmed, quietly from a distance. Malik could feel the weight of every glance. He had been in situations before, but this felt different. This was public, recorded, and utterly unnecessary. "Sir, can you step aside while I verify this?" the officer said, gesturing toward the lobby. Malik did, though his steps were careful, measured. He watched as the officer called someone over and started typing into a small tablet. Minutes passed, not hours, but long enough that Malik's patience thinned and the tension around him thickened. "You have your credentials," Malik said, more softly now. "Everything checks out. I don't understand why this is happening." The officer didn't answer, just kept tapping and talking quietly into a radio. Malik felt the murmurs behind him, people questioning, recording, their curiosity pressing like a weight against his back. Finally, someone else arrived, another officer, older, professional, calm. He glanced at Malik's ID and nodded. "He's cleared," the new officer said. Malik exhaled, relief flashing, but it was fleeting. The first officer still lingered, reluctant, as if the act of holding him had become routine. "You can go in now," the older officer said, giving a firm but respectful signal. Malik stepped forward, his movement controlled, but his mind still raced. He had entered this building countless times before without issue. Today, despite every proof of his role, he had been stopped, detained, and made to wait like a stranger. As he walked past the officers, Malik caught glimpses of people filming, their phones angled to capture the moment. Some whispered, others simply stared, but all of them had seen enough to remember. He didn't speak, didn't argue. There was no need. The record was already being made. Once inside, Malik paused, letting the door click behind him. The sense of being watched lingered. It wasn't just the officers or the crowd outside. It was the feeling that every unnecessary delay, every pause, every flicker of hesitation would now circulate beyond this building, beyond the street. He straightened his shoulders and moved toward his office. The incident was over, but the weight of it stayed. Credentials hadn't mattered. Authority hadn't mattered. What mattered was that someone had decided he should be questioned, delayed, scrutinized while the public watched and recorded. And for Malik, that sting was sharper than anything else. Malik slammed the folder down on his desk, frustration tight in his chest. He had spent weeks filing complaints, emails, and calls about what happened, but every response was the same. Polite, bureaucratic, dismissive. No violation found, they wrote. Procedure followed. He read the words again, feeling the weight of them. Procedure had followed, yes, but fairness hadn't. He thought back to the hallway. The officer blocking the door, the phones pointed at him, the whispered judgments of strangers. His credentials had meant nothing. His authority meant nothing. Every internal complaint he submitted had vanished into a void, leaving him alone with the memory of being treated like an outsider in his own workplace. The phone rang. He ignored it. His mind was busy calculating, reviewing options. There was only one path left that would force acknowledgement, that could hold someone accountable. The courts. Malik had spent years enforcing the law, interpreting it, ensuring it worked as it should. Now he was the one who needed the law to work for him. He opened a blank document and began drafting a plan. Every detail mattered. The date, the time, the officer's name, the witnesses, the videos captured by bystanders. He didn't need exaggeration. He had proof, and proof carried weight. He wrote clearly, concisely, making each line count. This wasn't a story, it was evidence. Malik remembered the tension in the lobby, the way the crowd had leaned in, silent but expectant. He had been patient, professional, restrained. But patience had limits, and respect had its boundaries. When those lines were crossed, silence and complaints didn't suffice. Action was the only response left. He paused, thinking of the potential fallout. Filing a lawsuit against a department he worked closely with wasn't simple. There would be criticism, questions, maybe even backlash. But Malik weighed against the alternative, continuing to be ignored, letting the system he respected dismiss him without consequence. That wasn't acceptable. He typed the final lines of his draft, a decision crystallizing with each word. He would sue, not for revenge, not for attention, but for acknowledgement of a truth that had been denied, for accountability, and for the principle that authority and fairness should mean something, even when cameras and public pressure were involved. Malik leaned back, letting the tension ease slightly. The decision lifted a weight from him. He knew it wouldn't be easy. He knew the process would be long and exhausting. But it was necessary. For the first time since the incident, he felt a measure of control return. He closed the folder and stood. The lobby incident, the endless bureaucracy, the dismissal of his complaints, it had brought him to a breaking point. But that breaking point wasn't defeat. It was clarity. Malik was done waiting. He would take the law into his own hands, in the only way that mattered. Formally, officially, and with everything documented. The courtroom was quiet but tense. Malik sat at the front table, papers stacked neatly in front of him, eyes fixed on the screen at the side. The footage played, a dozen angles, phones recording the same moment he had lived, showing every step, every hesitation, every unnecessary pause. He didn't flinch. This time it mattered. His attorney stood, voice steady. Your Honor, this footage clearly demonstrates that Mr. Malik was detained without cause despite proper credentials. The officer's actions violated established agency protocols. The judge nodded, eyes scanning the clips, occasionally glancing at the printed policies that had been submitted as exhibits. One by one, witnesses were called. A passerby who had filmed the incident described what they saw, careful to stick to facts. The timing, the blocking of the doorway, the officer ignoring repeated identification. Another testified about the murmurs of the crowd, the tension in the lobby, the way Malik had remained calm while authority figures hesitated. Every detail reinforced what the video had already shown. Malik had been stopped unnecessarily. The agency's attorney tried to argue procedure, claiming that verification was standard. Malik's attorney countered by showing internal policies, emails, and past procedures that clearly outlined immediate clearance for federal officials. Every document was precise, showing where the line had been crossed. Malik watched quietly, absorbing each testimony, each slide of policy documents. He didn't feel vindictive, but he felt the weight of truth finally moving through a system that had previously ignored it. His own voice wasn't needed here. The evidence spoke for him. The crowd outside the courthouse, aware of the trial, had begun sharing clips, commentary, and discussions online. Public interest added pressure, though Malik kept his focus entirely on the facts in front of him. Cross-examinations were careful, strategic. The officer who had detained him described his actions as routine, necessary, but the inconsistencies were clear under questioning. Dates, times, phrasing in internal communications all contradicted the claims of adherence to protocol. Malik felt a strange satisfaction watching the truth align so clearly with the evidence he had kept. Hours passed, and the pace never slowed. Every witness, every document, every clip reinforced the same point. The detention had been unnecessary, public scrutiny had been unavoidable, and the internal dismissals of complaints had been wrong. Malik's attorney summarized with precision, connecting cause and effect in a way that left little room for doubt. When it ended, Malik leaned back, exhausted but steady. The judge asked for closing statements, and Malik's attorney spoke calmly about accountability, fairness, and the principle that no one, no matter how credentials might suggest authority, should be dismissed or detained without cause. Malik walked out of the courtroom knowing the fight wasn't over, but the truth had been laid bare. The recordings, the policies, the witnesses, they all told the story he had lived. For the first time, the system he had respected for so long was listening, compelled by evidence he had insisted on presenting, and by the clarity of a record that could no longer be ignored. The courtroom held its breath as the foreperson stood, paper in hand. We, the jury, find in favor of the plaintiff, Malik, with damages awarded at $9,300,000. The words landed like a hammer. Malik's shoulders relaxed slightly, tension finally breaking after months of waiting. Around him, murmurs rippled. Some faces were shocked, others relieved, but all felt the weight of what had just happened. The agency's attorneys slumped. Their strategy, built on procedure and deniability, had collapsed under the evidence, the footage, and the witnesses. What had begun as routine bureaucratic defense had turned into public failure. Every misstep, every ignored complaint, every unjust pause in the lobby had now cost them financially and reputationally. Malik's victory was more than monetary. It was a statement that authority without fairness had consequences. Outside the courtroom, phones were raised again. Reporters crowded near the steps, microphones pointed toward Malik. He stepped forward, calm but deliberate. There was no anger in his voice, no grandstanding, only clarity. "This isn't about money," he said. "It's about accountability. It's about dignity. It's about ensuring that procedures meant to protect people don't become tools for unnecessary obstruction or humiliation." He paused, letting the words sink in. Cameras captured every moment. But Malik didn't feel the need to perform. He was speaking truth, and truth didn't require embellishment. "When systems fail us," he continued, "we have a responsibility to hold them accountable, not for revenge, but for reform, for clarity, for change." People outside the courthouse nodded, whispered, recorded. Social media lit up with clips from the trial, now showing not only the detention but the verdict, the public acknowledgement of wrongdoing. The narrative had shifted. What had started as a single moment of unnecessary scrutiny had become a lesson in transparency, evidence, and perseverance. Malik's attorney placed a hand on his shoulder, subtle but supportive. He nodded once, grateful for the guidance and careful preparation that had made this possible. The public, the cameras, the agency, they had all seen the truth laid bare. The cost of ignoring it had been steep. As Malik descended the courthouse steps, he looked at the crowd that had gathered. Some had been there from the beginning, some only drawn by curiosity or the virality of the clips. He addressed them directly, voice steady and calm. "Every one of us deserves respect and fairness, no matter our role, no matter our status. Accountability isn't optional, it's necessary. And reform isn't a choice, it's a responsibility. He stepped aside, letting the cameras capture him, letting reporters take notes. Justice had been served in a courtroom, but the real transformation was public communal. People had seen that standing for truth mattered, that persistence mattered, and that dignity could be defended without anger, without spectacle. Malik turned, walking away from the steps with the quiet confidence of someone who had not just won a verdict, but had sparked a lesson in fairness that would echo far beyond the walls of that courthouse. If this story shows that even a badge doesn't shield anyone from racial profiling, share it with someone who needs to see it. Meaningful change happens when victims speak out. What reforms do you think could prevent officials from targeting individuals based on skin color? Share your thoughts in the comments. Don't forget to like and subscribe. You bring you stories where standing up for justice comes at a cost, but ultimately drives lasting change.